I've always been fascinated by human beings and all their complexity, and even human beings who do appalling things. The question is, why?
At the start of A Game of Thrones, Catelyn Stark receives a coded letter from her sister Lysa Arryn. It tells of a conspiracy by the Lannisters, that the Queen's family had Jon Arryn, the Hand of the King, murdered. Fearing for the safety of the king's life, Catelyn urges her husband Ned Stark to travel south to the capital and join the king as his new hand. The thought is that the king could use more friends in court, and Ned can begin investigating the murder of Jon Arryn. Ned brings with him his 2 daughters and their direwolves on this journey to King's Landing, but the choice to leave his home of Winterfell would lead to his own death. One of his daughters would go missing, the other would be taken hostage, the start of the War of the Five Kings, the death of his eldest son, and the entire destabilization of Westeros. It isn't until the 3rd book that we learn who truly killed Jon Arryn. It was Lysa herself who murdered her husband. She was in fact manipulating her sister with false information. Lysa in turn was being manipulated by Littlefinger, so he could pit the Starks and the Lannisters against each other, planning that in the chaos, he could see himself rise in power.
Chaos is a ladder.
In the end, it was never really Ned's choice to make. In a George R. R. Martin story, somebody is almost always somebody else's puppet, whether they're being manipulated by small men with big ambitions, lords and kings doling out empty promises, or magical trees influencing people through dreams and visions. At Elden Ring's midpoint, when King Morgott is listing off all of the demigods, he calls them
willful traitors. All.
It is assumed that after the disappearance of Queen Marika and King Consort Ratigan, and the shattering of the Elden Ring, that the demigods came together in what was known as the Sovereign Alliance. They most likely sat in their thrones at the base of the Erd Tree and attempted to broker peace, but as Morgott tells us, they willfully betrayed that pact. Located outside of the outer walls of the capital is a sword monument dedicated to the First Defense of Leyendell, one of the first battles of the Shattering. It reads, "A sovereign alliance rots from within, traces yet remain of bloody conspiracy." The line "rots from within" is a clear allusion to Melania, the one-armed swordswoman who has been afflicted with a rotting sickness ever since she was born. And when it comes to bloody conspiracies, Mohg, the Lord of Blood, is our most likely culprit. Mohg abducted Melania's twin brother Mikola and brought him to his secret underground lair beneath Caelid, the lands where the final battle of the Shattering took place. Melania marched to war against Radahn in these lands, the battle ending with what was akin to a chemical bomb exploding and decimating the region for generations to come, all right above where Mohg brought Mikola. From this, we can start painting a picture that the Sovereign Alliance rotted from within because Mohg's conspiracy to kidnap Mikola, and this would kick off the chain of events that would lead to the detonation of a fantasy nuclear bomb. Who knows what type of accusations were made between the demigods toward the last days of peace in the lands between. The description of Mikola's bewitching branch tells how he was loved by many people, and that he learned very well how to compel such affection. Using this item for yourself, you could put someone under your spell and have them fight for you, against their own will. The recipe for these branches can only be learned after discovering Mogwyn Palace in-game, the place where Mohg brought Mikola. And in hindsight, we can see that this was the smoking gun all along. If you've played Shadow of the Erd Tree, you should be aware that Mohg was bewitched by Mikola, and he most likely didn't choose of his own volition to follow through on this kidnapping plan. Some of us have theorized this long before the expansion, but no one could have expected that Melania was sent to kill Radahn to fulfill a promise between the twin Empyreans and the Starscourge. Also, Radahn's soul could be reborn into Mohg's corpse, and Mikola would have a lord as he rose to godhood. If that was on your bingo card, congratulations. Much like Littlefinger, Mikola planned to gain more power in the chaos of the Shattering War. He didn't need to bewitch everyone in order to manipulate these events. Only a few key players needed to be put under his charm so that he would come out on top. But when Mikola destroys his Great Rune, many of his followers are shocked to find that our Tarnished doesn't seem to have changed or is affected in any way. They were all brought together in an alliance with one another because they were all equally bewitched by Mikola. But at the drop of a hat, they're at each other's throats. Before the final confrontation with the followers of Mikola, Needle Knight Letta seems to have figured out our secret.
It was never kindly Mikola, was it? The Erd Tree was leading you all along, so that you might ascend to lordship. Why come to these lands to begin with? I suppose it must be what His Eminence, or perhaps the Erd Tree, desired all along. The clashing of the favored lords, such that one would prevail.
The Tarnished wasn't being manipulated by Mikola. We weren't bewitched by his charms, but being led by the Erd Tree. Isn't that interesting? How could our Tarnished, how could we as players have been manipulated by the Erd Tree? We have free will. We have the power to choose. No matter what you do, if you want to beat the game, you have to burn down the Erd Tree. So Letta must be mistaken, right? Well, not every puppet's strings are so easily visible, so let's see if we can find ours. White Mask Vare is the first friendly face we meet in the Lands Between, and although he's attempting to smooth talk us so we can raise a new pureblood knight, there is some truth to his words.
Are you familiar with grace? You may also behold its golden rays.
Alright, Grace is leading the Tarnished. The tutorial prompt from the game itself says that Grace exists to guide the Tarnished and lead them along the proper path. Melina tells us that Grace comes from the Erd Tree, that it is all that guides us, and she asks if we can still see it. This is a question many characters ask us. If our Tarnished can still see the guidance of Grace. From devout priests like Corrin to petty criminals like Boggart, many Tarnished were guided by Grace, but now it seems like only our character is being led by the nose to gain lordship. The two fingers at the table of Lost Grace seem to believe that it was the greater will who beckoned the return of the Tarnished. Corrin, as our prime example of a good and holy man, echoes the sentiment that by using the strength granted by the two fingers, a Tarnished of the Round Table Hold can become Elden Lord. The churches outside the Lands Between are dedicated to the teachings of the two fingers, for which they would send out confessors, but more plainly, church assassins, to follow the guidance of Grace. To them, guidance just meant hunting down and disposing of any enemy of the church. So is Grace the greater will, talking through the power of the Erd Tree to mend the shattered Elden Ring, by having the Tarnished slay Marika's children and set the worlds to right? No, of course not. The two fingers have been broken for a very long time, as discovered by both Gideon and Ymir. And also by us. After being spurned by the impenetrable thorns, the two fingers freeze up. They did not expect this to happen. There is really only one option for who is controlling Grace. So everybody, say it with me now, your mom. Just kidding, it's Queen Marika. I think we all knew this. Marika, Grace, and the Erd Tree are almost always synonymous with one another in Elden Ring. From spells like Minor Erd Tree, the secret incantation of Queen Marika, or the Blessing of Marika, which calls her the Queen of the Erd Tree. Marika divesting Godfrey and his warriors of grace and creating the Tarnished, to bestowing an iris of grace to her children to seal things away. All evidence points to Grace being Marika's bag. Mesmer, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Ouch. The source of Grace is the Erd Tree, and it's essentially made up of rune fragments from the Elden Ring itself. From the golden rune items, we learn that those born at the foot of the Erd Tree were blessed with the vivid coloration of the grace of gold. By using these items, we gain runes and can use that to enhance our Tarnished. Some, like the Omen or those who are born far away from the Erd Tree, are either born graceless or with less grace. Most of the soldiers in Mesmer's crusade were actually criminals, part of a penal battalion, and were rewarded with grace aplenty for joining the crusade. A few even had grace personally bestowed on them by Queen Marika. It's pretty clear that Marika has the power to give grace, take it away, dictate its guidance, and that she uses this power to her full advantage. So what does Marika want exactly? And how can Grace answer that question? First, we're going to look at where it points. We're going to start off in the Land of Shadow. By looking at the map in the underground, we can see that there are sites of lost grace everywhere, but none of them have any guidance. Marika is giving us assistance and respite, but it doesn't seem like she wants us down here. Unless we can deduce otherwise later, let's assume that Marika does not want us exploring the underground. The only way to the Land of Shadow, a place that Marika hid away, is through killing Mohg and using Miquella's withered arm. It's actually going to take some time for us to find guidance in the Land of Shadow. For the most part, it is Miquella who is guiding us, in a way. The Shadow Tree fragments found at his crosses are generally what is leading us through this place, like a carrot on a stick. It isn't until defeating the Divine Beast Dancing Lion do we get Grace's guidance, and it points us directly to the Shadow Keep. Grace's guidance won't appear again until we reach the keep, defeat Mesmer, acquire his kindling, and then we are led to the Sealing Tree through the Rao ruins. Marika does not want us in the Land of Shadow, but if we're gonna be here, we best at least kill Mesmer, burn the Sealing Tree, and stop Miquella from attaining godhood. This all seems in line with Marika and her goals. Back in the Lands Between, we can start looking at her intended path for us. Now, I think I have a clear picture of what Marika is trying to get us to do with all of Grace's guidance, except one set. Those that point towards Castle Morn. I'm not quite sure what exactly is here that she would want us to see or do. Perhaps it has something to do with the Crafted Greatsword, or maybe it has to do with Arena and the Frenzy Flame quest, but I'm not sure. From where we meet Vare, we can see that it points towards the Church of El, which is where we meet Ranni the Witch and receive the Spirit Calling Bell. Then to the Stormgate, where most players first meet Melina, gaining the ability to level up, and where we also get our trusty Spectral Steed. Eventually, Grace points us towards Castle Stormvale, where we can fight Godric the Grafted and claim his Great Rune. We can look west and see that Grace wants us to go to Castle Redmane and slay Radahn, claiming his great rune. In Liurnia, it points us through the lake and into Raya Lucaria to face Rennala and unlock the power of rebirth. Afterwards, it leads us into the Altus Plateau and towards the capital to seek the throne and take down Morgoth. If we take a slight detour, Grace will point us towards Rykard so we can play Hitman and then fillet a snake. When Melina gives us the rolled medallion, we can then journey to the Forbidden Lands, where Grace points us eventually to reaching the Forge of the Giants and burning the Erd Tree. This all makes sense. We know from echoes of Marika given to us by Melina that Marika is perfectly okay with the Tarnished smacking around her kids and taking their great runes. We do in fact need at least 2 of them to be able to repair the Shattered Elden Ring. We also learn from Melina that her mother gave her the purpose of burning down the Erd Tree, and that she's totally on board with burning herself alive. We have a clear picture that although our Tarnished has free will, they are still being pushed in a direction that Marika wants us to go. The other Tarnished that we meet on our journey mostly lament how they cannot see Grace any longer, and that they lost the ability for it to give them direction. Without its guidance, they usually find someone or something else to lead them by the hand. But what about the endings? You may have noticed that I skipped over some of Grace's guidance. The last guidance of Grace has to do with the endings that Marika wants, and the endings she doesn't want. The one she doesn't want is pretty clear. It's the Frenzy Flame ending. This is the only ending that Melina begs us not to do. And if we do go through with Chaos Take the World, if she is available, Melina will look you in the eye and promise to deliver what is yours.
Destined death.
The death that all mortal men are destined to die. In Caelid, Grace actually has a branching path. Not only will it point us towards Radahn, it also points us towards Millicent, one of Elden Ring's most beloved characters. By following Millicent's questline, you might find yourself at the Shaded Castle and getting your hands on a prosthetic arm. Desperate to know what happens next with our soft-spoken rotted warrior, you could end up in the Village of the Windmills fighting a godskin apostle. Eventually, you might find Grace pointing you towards Castle Sol for 1/2 of the Halig Tree medallion, and having 1/2 is all you need to search for the other. Grace doesn't really need to compel the Tarnished anymore at this point. There are characters who ask for your aid, mostly young women in need of a strong arm and a big sword. Or the pull of curiosity, a bewitching force all on its own. By following Grace and assisting Millicent, we can end up with Miquella's Needle, so that in the event that our Tarnished does take the Frenzied Flame, the effects can be undone, and we are free to choose a different ending for the game. As for the other endings, Melina doesn't seem to have a preference which you choose, but Grace does. Grace points us to another demigod. It points us up towards Caria Manor, and towards Ranni. She was the demigod who orchestrated the Night of the Black Knives, where the beloved Godwyn the Golden was assassinated. This plot would be the catalyst to the rise of those who live in death, the destabilization of the lands between, the return of the Tarnished, and the war known as the Shattering. Unlike the other demigods, you can't harm Ranni in any way. You can only help her, even if you side with Seluvis. Preceptor Seluvis is supposed to be one of Ranni's trusted war counselors, except he harbors a secret. Seluvis is into puppets, and not the dolls with strings, but the magical act of enslaving one's soul for eternity. We can find his hidden chambers where the near lifeless bodies of men and women are strewn about. When a puppet has their strings cut, they slump to the ground in a lifeless pose. They aren't dead, but this is no life anyone would want to live. If we indicate to Seluvis that we may also be into puppets by purchasing 2 paramours, he will let us in on a scheme to enslave Ranni. Although Ranni's soul is housed in a doll, she's not willing to be anyone's puppet. Whether you go through the scheme or not, Ranni will have Seluvis killed in retaliation. Well, not Seluvis, but Pydia. See, Seluvis was a puppet the whole time being controlled by a Carian servant, their master of puppets, and Ranni the doll knew the whole time. In a George R. R. Martin story, sometimes puppet masters are puppets themselves. After doing Ranni's bidding and helping her reach her goals by killing Radahn and retrieving the Fingerslayer blade, she will leave her tower and Grace will appear in her place, pointing towards Renna's rise, pointing you to follow after Ranni. Following Grace, we can find Ranni as a miniature doll, and if we're persistent enough, she'll put us up to one more errand, eventually rewarding the player with a discarded key that gives us access to the Dark Moon wedding ring. With this ring, we can continue fighting all the Remembrance bosses and collecting all the legendary weapons to unlock all of the achievements. I mean, we can marry Ranni and complete the Age of Stars ending, the most popular ending in the game. In a Reddit post made a year after the game came out, user TurtleBoy42069 pointed out that according to Steam statistics, the Age of Stars ending was more popular than the default ending, netting 6.8% more completion. This doesn't even account for the players who achieved both endings after the fact. The top comment by Advanced Sock read, "I feel like the game almost leads you towards her ending rather than the default one." For which Historic Cartographer replied, "You miss like 40% of the game if you don't do her questline." What is so interesting about Ranni is that she did not want to be controlled by the two fingers. She didn't want to be controlled by that thing. In an effort to fight for her own bodily autonomy, she slew her own Empyrean flesh and stored her soul in that of a doll. She was a puppet who cut her own strings so she could fight against a giant hand for freedom. Well, part of a giant hand at least. In my last video, I presented the theory that the dragon, Baal the Dread, was actually a Silver Tier mimic, a man-made copy of a dragon used to take down the Dragon Lord Placidusax. I provided the evidence of their similarities and alluded to the reasons why the Nox would attempt to destabilize the Society of Ancient Dragons. Check out that video if you're interested. I mentioned that you should trust my theory because I've read nearly all of George R. R. Martin's work, and gave you an example of his influence by telling you that one of his dragons from A Song of Ice and Fire has a similar name to Baal's, Balerion the Black Dread. Some people didn't like this theory because they felt it cheapened Baal's story of his rebellion wasn't his choice, that being a copy invalidated who he is as a character and what he did. And I think people felt that way because I neglected to talk about the Faceless Men of A Song of Ice and Fire. See, the Faceless Men used to be slaves to the Dragon Lords of Old Valeria. Some theorize that they were enslaved for eternity by being turned into Firewights. Unable to die, the slaves would all pray to their own religion's god of death. It is said that the first of the Faceless Men heard the prayers of the slaves to their various gods and concluded that they all prayed to the same god with 100 different faces, the many-faced god, the god of death. This led to the giving of the first gift to the most desperate of slaves, the gift of death. Eventually, they would give this gift to the Valerian Masters, to the Dragon Lords. Some Westerosi scholars believe that this was the cause of the doom of Valeria, a volcanic cataclysm that destroyed old Valeria and killed nearly all of their dragons. That these Faceless Men brought about the destruction and end to the once great empire of Dragon Lords. Now, the Faceless Men operate out of the House of Black and White, located in Braavos, a city made from escaped Valerian slaves, and they can be hired as assassins to take down high-profile targets. The Faceless Men are called such because they have the power to change their faces. They can assume the identity of anyone they've killed. They can mimic those that they have given the gift to. With a power like that, who knows who they could be masquerading as? Who knows how they could be manipulating those of Westeros and beyond? In the current day of A Song of Ice and Fire, they are training young Arya Stark to become no one, to become one of the Faceless Men. You remember how Stark, from the beginning of the video, how Ned Stark was manipulated into leaving his wife to go to King's Landing, how he brought his daughters with him to the capital. Well, while at the capital, Arya is trained in sword fighting. See, her father found that Arya had a sword of her own, forged by the Stark royal blacksmith, a slender sword called Needle, and to make his daughter happy, he hired a teacher for her. Her teacher would be Syrio Forel, a former first sword to the Sea Lord of Braavos, and he would teach her the sword fighting technique called water dancing. Eventually, Arya joins the House of Black and White, and she is trained by the Faceless Men. And in the show, she uses her training and a magical dagger to slay the Night's King, the head White Walker who can raise the dead. Now, what the hell does this have to do with Elden Ring, the Nox, or even Ranni? I don't think I need to tell you that from the Wolf Crest shield, we learn that the wolf is the beast that symbolizes the Carian Royal Covenant. I may have to tell you that the sigil of House Stark is a direwolf, though. You already know that Iji, the Carian royal blacksmith, forged a slender sword called Frozen Needle. Everybody knows that Ranni had a secret mentor who taught her her cold sorceries. It's common knowledge that Ranni worked with the Black Knife Assassins, a group of faceless women, to imbue the rune of death into their blades so they can assassinate Godwyn the Golden. That this manipulation caused the Shattering War, the spreading of Deathroot and those who live in death, and the return of the Tarnished, and all the events that lead to the burning of the Erd Tree. You don't need anyone else to explain over and over again how long ago the Nox invoked the ire of the Greater Will and were banished deep underground, that now they live under a false night sky in eternal anticipation of their liege, of the coming age of stars, and their Lord of Night. The Mimic Tier Ashes are the most popular Spirit Ash in the game by far, and yet I still get comments like this that read, the Nox tried to create their own lord and usher in their own age, yes. But the point of their story is that they failed. They never succeed in their ideas because they are mimicking and not creating their own original things. Original. Right. In the Frenzy Flame ending, Marika's body crumples into dust as the world around her is destroyed. In the Elden Throne endings, Marika is broken and fractured as the Elden Ring is housed in her body. But in the Dark Moon ending, in the Nox's coming age of stars, Ranni lifts up Marika's head and then she dissipates into golden dust. Most players brought about this coming age of stars. Most became Ranni's Lord of Night, and Grace led the way. Have you noticed that at every single site of Grace in Elden Ring, there's these small roots growing beneath them? Every site of Grace but two. The one located at the Table of Lost Grace and Grace mimics. Similar to Grace, this fetish draws rays guiding the way, only without any sense of order. It's not really Grace, it's just mimicking it. The two fingers at the Table of Lost Grace were shocked to learn that one who followed Grace was spurned by the Erd Tree. They locked up and froze in an attempt to divine an answer. How come they didn't know? Found in the Land of Shadow are these light pink mushrooms that resemble wizened fingers. They are used by those who wish to become fingers to induce hallucinations. They call these mushrooms the stillborn of the two fingers, but the game calls them finger mimics. The Nox didn't fail. They just needed to mimic a Song of Ice and Fire. They used mimics to manipulate you. If this was really your choice, to summon Ranni and her Dark Moon, why'd you do it? Was it because Ranni gifted you the Spirit Calling Bell? Was it because the game almost led you to this ending over the default one? Was it because nearly 40% of the game was locked behind Ranni's questline? Was it because when Melina greeted you at a site of Lost Grace, she looked you in the eye and offered you an accord? You chose to follow Grace and take her to the Erd Tree. When that failed, you were led to the Forge. Before Melina finally says goodbye, she looks down at your Tarnished and then turns her attention to you. That's right, she's looking at you. Was it because when you reached the end of the game, after all was said and done, the only ones left were you and the doll? When we reach the Gate of Divinity, Miquella addresses our Tarnished.
My loyal blade and champion of the festival, both your deeds will ever be praised in song.
In order to even get to this point, you need to play some part in Miquella's plan, whether you want to or not. You need to fell Radahn and send his soul to the Land of Shadow. You need to kill Moog so his body can be used as Radahn's vessel. After Miquella's defeat, once you slay the eternally youthful and ever-bewitching god, all of his followers and enemies slump to the ground. Tolier, Ansbach, Letta, Dane, Freya, and more. After the child is gone, no one is left to play with the dolls. They remain lifeless, with no one to give them direction. The lands between is a little more empty now. All that's left at the top of the world is you and your puppet.
What the fans have to keep in mind, and I hate to say this because I don't want to sound like I'm attacking the fans. I love the fans. I'm a fan myself of many of these franchises. But we're making this shit up.
Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, consider liking and subscribing. After all, it's your choice. See you in the next one.